Queensland State Director of the Australian Christian Lobby, Wendy Francis. Welcome to Voice for Values.
Thanks for having me, Martin.
Wendy, I've got you on today because you've got some big things happening up there in Queensland. I think most of our supporters, even in other states, would be aware of the changes that are planned by the Palaszczuk government to the abortion laws up there. I want to start, before getting into the details and the brass tacks of that, just by asking you personally, as the State Director for the ACL, and as a woman yourself, why abortion? What is it about abortion that makes you so motivated on this issue? Because I know you've been doing heaps up there and working tirelessly.
Look, it's been full on, Martin, you're right. And the reason I care about it, from a personal point of view, I have not actually been impacted personally by abortion. But there is not a woman out there that has not had a friend or someone they know or a child or even a mother who has been impacted by abortion. We're finding that 1 in 3 women are having an abortion in Australia at the moment, which is quite a shocking statistic. And instead of actually trying to solve the problem of why, we're actually trying to make it more easy to get. So we'll get onto that, I'm sure. But I'm a grandmother, so obviously I've had my own children and then I've had grandchildren. And every life is precious to God. And so I care about it from that view. But I also have walked the journey with friends who have had abortions even many years ago. And whilst there is forgiveness and there is redemption, and that is so totally what I see in my friends, there is also sadness and there's grief and there is a scar. And abortion leaves a terrible scar. And so we're seeing women, when we think of the number of women who are having abortion, we are experiencing women walking through our street every day who are suffering from the grief of abortion.
See, I guess that's the point, isn't it? That when something is wrong, it leaves casts a long shadow, so to speak. I mean, there's consequences. And whilst as Christians we know that there is the redemption, as you mentioned, the consequences stay with people. And is it a question then of love of neighbour? Is it a question of showing compassion to the women of this world, and indeed, I suppose, some men also who are impacted by abortion knowingly? Is it a matter of showing requisite compassion to them to make sure that this sort of thing isn't available to them, or they are at least given every opportunity within reason to take another path?
I think that's the important part. Yes, we want to actually stop abortion, and nobody says they want more abortion, and yet they're making it easier to get and easier to get. The important thing is that God does present us with choices, and even in the Bible, He says, "I set before you life and death," and He says, "Oh, that you would choose life." You can hear the cry in His voice, and so for us as Christians, to our neighbours, what we're wanting to do present that pathway. And what we're fighting against in our government bill at the moment is just an absolute pathway to the office. There is no pathway to the office. There is no counselling for women. There is no opportunity for support for women who are experiencing a difficult pregnancy or an unwanted pregnancy or circumstances in their life that make a pregnancy really uncomfortable for them at the time. We're not offering any support there. All we're doing is just saying, get rid of it. And it's not, and the get rid of it leads to an enormous amount of trauma and guilt and suffering for many, many women. Not all, but many, many women.
It's interesting you chose that scripture that actually says life and death. There's almost nothing more relevant to that point than what we're facing right now. Let's just drill down for a second into the extent to which this is an issue of, I suppose, death, or it's a nasty business. And I wanted to start, and this could be a little graphic, but and I think it's important though that people understand this. What actually is abortion? What's the process involved? Because I'm so conscious that this is something that happens behind the 4 walls of a building. It happens under the respectability of medical care. It's something that is hidden away from eyes. But in actual fact, it's not a very pleasant process, is it?
No, it's not. And it is hidden from eyes. And even if you make an appointment to go to the abortion clinics here in Brisbane, very clearly stated on the on the website is that you're not to bring children. So they don't want children in there because the very sight of a child actually invokes something in a woman. And so in the same way as we would want children exposed to an abortion clinic, I don't want children exposed to the graphic nature of abortion. I want to protect them from that. But I do think that adults need to know what the process actually is, because otherwise we can just make it seem something like, oh, it's just a health procedure. Well, it's actually not. It is the death of a child. So up to about 9 or 10 weeks, it is a pesticide that is taken by a woman, usually a drug, and the pesticide actually kills the baby inside. But this is a woman taking a pesticide. I don't think we can we can't brush that off.
Is that the ingredient in the drug, is it, that is actually used
Yes.
also as a pesticide?
Yes,
Okay.
it is pesticide. And then for 10 to 15 weeks, it's suction that is used. And so the baby is sucked out like a vacuum cleaner. The baby is dismembered in the process, and there is no pain for the baby. So I'll leave that there.
But that is just to stop there for a second. It is true, though, that an unborn child can feel pain. That is a researched phenomenon.
There seems to be absolutely no doubt. And the reason how they know that is because of operations that they do, or they might go into the wound to actually fix something, and the baby will recoil. The baby will pull back from a needle or any heat or anything like that. The baby will actually pull back. And so it would seem very scientific to say that the baby would experience pain. There's no reason to believe that the baby wouldn't. So 10 to 15 weeks, the baby is sucked out and dismembered in that way. After 15 weeks, 15 weeks, we're talking in Queensland now, after 22 weeks with no question. After 15 weeks, it's a 3-day process. Dilation is required first of all on day 1, and then it is suction. But again, the baby is dismembered. The baby, after 20 weeks, the baby is actually delivered bit by bit.
So this is a harrowing thing, really. I was just as you were talking there about the pain. I remember I saw online there was a quote from Dr. Ben Carson, who many people will know, and he said he's operated on children in the womb as a brain surgeon. He says, "I assure you, they are very much alive." So that's the experience of somebody who has that, first-hand encounter with what you said, the reactions and responses of an unborn child. The other thing you mentioned there, which was interesting, I thought, was the children not allowed in the clinic. And I think we all instinctively know that a child has a certain impact on a woman, and so too does the prospect of having children. So it seems to me that for many women, and I could never say universally, but for many women, actually getting to that point where they're in the clinic facing what's about to happen is not just a process that comes about completely spontaneously. There's usually a whole lot going on in the life of that person. And again, not always, sometimes it's a matter of convenience, but there can so often be. I mean, would you agree with that? Does that match up with what you know of people who have gone through that process?
Absolutely. The young women that I've talked to, even just recently, who've come forward with this proposed bill, have spoken of sitting in there just wishing inside that somebody would say to them, "We will help you have this baby," rather than sitting in this room of death. They talk of a room filled with flowers and light and happy colours, when inside all they're doing is just feeling absolutely devastated and dying inside. They talk about the experience of saying, my partner wants me to have this abortion because we've only been together for 6 months. And the abortionist saying, yes, well, that makes perfect sense. When inside all the woman's wanting is for them to say, you don't have to go through with this. I mean, we have very few pregnancy counselling places here in Queensland. One of the ones that we have in Brisbane, one of the largest ones, is supported by the Queensland government financially. So it's a pregnancy counselling link. It's actually online, so I find that not very helpful either. But they themselves say that 7 out of 10 men of unexpected pregnancy. So the man in the partnership with an unexpected pregnancy, 7 out of 10 put some coercion on their partner to have the abortion. So we're talking a very high level of women who are in that clinic that you just mentioned. They're in the clinic and they're there because they have been told this is the only option and this is what you've got to go through with, and they don't want to be there.
So it's really just a whole. It could be any number of things. There could be the coercion. There could be the domestic violence. It could be that they're alone in the world. It could be a question of finance. It could be. So there's all of those issues going in. What about on the side of coming out? You mentioned before, Wendy, that many women are impacted negatively by the process. And putting aside just the fact the process itself is terrible, but let's just focus on that narrow point of what are the outcomes, what's the long shadow cast by this. I know you've spoken to a number of women who have been there and come out the other side and repented of it or regretted it. What is it that stays with them? What is the harm that does long term?
The harm is probably best described by them celebrating the birthday of the child that would have been. Celebrating is not a good word, but remembering every time the anniversary of their abortion comes around, imagining what that child would be now, imagining who that child would be. And even when they have other children, and if they do, because many women who have abortions actually end up being infertile. That's one side effect of abortion. But if women have more children, watching those children and imagining what that other child would be, it's a maternal instinct. As soon as you find out you're pregnant, Martin, and you'll never experience that as a man, but you might, if you get married, you might experience that even vicariously with your wife. But that experience that you have straight away as you bond with that child is incredibly strong. So to try and deny that is a child is a real effort, and many women never actually recover from that thing.
So this really does come back to what I said almost at the start, where people say, well, you have no right over a woman's body, you have no right to tell a woman what she should do. But the reason you're interested in this, the reason I'm interested in this, the reason ACL's interested in this, it's a question of just simple compassion. It's a question of right and wrong, yes, and that's important. But there's more to a question of right and wrong than just moralising. There is actually a question of love of neighbour here. There's something here that says we must, for the sake of the child, we must, for the sake of women and for the sake of couples and parents and everywhere, resolve these issues properly. It seems to me that abortion is a pathway that is opened up to people who are very often facing other issues, and those other issues are never resolved. And that's not compassionate.
No, I actually see abortion almost as in the same way as suicide. So when somebody takes their own life, they do so because they don't see any other hope. They believe there is no other way out. And many women, most women I would say, feel the same when they have an abortion. They don't see any other way out. And so I guess what ACL wants to do is not just say no to abortion. What we want to do is actually advocate further then for options for women. So we're not seeing our government give options for women who are in difficult pregnancies. We're not seeing the support that women need. So what ACL want to do is not just say, no, you can't have an abortion, but look, no, this is not going to be for your well-being, certainly not for the well-being of our nation even. If you look at the bigger picture, we've got an aging population. We're actually destroying over 100,000 babies in the womb every year. It doesn't even make much sense. So it's not in the best interest of our nation. But we can't just say, don't do it, without giving options for women who are in serious problems. There are many women who are in really dire circumstances. And I think it would be the wrong thing just to say no without then advocating for, and that's what we're wanting to do. We're wanting to advocate for our government. Okay, yes, you're concerned for women. We are concerned for women too. But the answer that you're giving women is not what women want or need. That is not what they want or need. And so we want to advocate for what women truly, truly want, and that is true options and true support when they need it the most.
Well, let's focus in on that for a second. I mean, the proposal by the government as it stands now, you point out, doesn't give options. Let's just go through the ways in which that's the case. So, for example, I'm right, am I not, in saying that there's no opportunity for counselling, for example. You just go to the clinic, get the job done. That's that.
That's exactly right. And some people who work in a clinic would say that they do give counselling, but they are there to perform an abortion. When a woman books in for an abortion, you can book in online and you can get the abortion booked in for the next day. And basically, the instructions are to fast for 3 hours. So when you book in, you're told to fast for 3 hours. So that is not come in and we'll talk about it. It's come in and you'll be prepared for it. So we are not seeing counselling being offered. And sometimes what a woman really wants and needs desperately is for somebody to say, look, these are your options. The option is to keep the baby, and what do you need for help to keep the baby? There's another option, and the option is for adoption. So choose life for your baby, but also for another couple who are desperately longing for a child. There's that option as well. That's not given either.
And they're even removing, I know there's exclusion zones provisions in the legislation, and I'm aware that in other states, or in, I think perhaps even in Queensland, there have been a faithful group of people who we call sidewalk counsellors, who get a terrible name for what they do, but having spoken to some of these people, they really are the last line before a woman goes into those places. And they, by making simple offers of help, have in fact over years seen hundreds of babies born through helping those women in the circumstances they're in, whether it is safe haven from domestic violence, whether it is financial support, whether it is a friend, whatever they need. This is a group of people who provide that, but they provide that because that's not coming from other sources. And not only does this bill not include any options really for serious counselling, but it prevents others from stepping in the breach and doing anything about it.
Absolutely. And you're right that in Queensland here, particularly at the Bowen Hill, there's been a group that just stand and pray, and they're there. They offer, they can offer assistance if a woman wants that assistance. They don't yell, they don't stand in the way, they don't obstruct, but they're there with a loving hand or heart or voice to be able to help if that woman needs it. And you're right, women and babies' lives are saved through that. But this 150 metres is gone even more extreme than the Pine Bills. The Pine Bills were 100. So the Pine Bills from 2016, 2017 in Queensland, Rob Pine was an independent member. He introduced two very extreme abortion bills, but I would have to say that this one goes even further. And so he introduced 100-metre exclusion zones. Jackie Trad and the LP government have increased that by 150 metres.
One of the things that I'm conscious that we haven't touched on, Wendy, is that when it comes to this counselling, one of the other things that proper independent counselling can uncover is domestic violence and coercion. Can you talk to that a little bit? Because I think it's something that historically hasn't been thought about much. The notion that women are coerced into this practice.
There is absolutely no doubt that this happens. And even so the secular organisation that I spoke to before would say that 7 out of 10 men in unwanted pregnancies would try and persuade, coerce. Sometimes I think it goes even further. But can I just give one really stark example? And this is not, there's lots of examples. We've had two very high-profile football partner girls who have been coerced into having an abortion over the past 18 months or so, and that's been very, very public. But in Queensland, just in August, we had the case of Brock Wall, who was actually, who went before our courts, and he received a sentence of double murder. And the reason he received that sentence is because he killed his partner, and his partner was 10 weeks pregnant with their baby. Now, leading up to him killing his partner, Brock Wall used to scream at her, so it's all documented in the court, but to have an abortion. And he would scream at her and yell at her that she had to get rid of the baby. And in the end, he has killed her and the baby. Now, the courts recognise this as double murder. So that is probably the most extreme case of coercion that I can probably give you, and it ended tragically. But it is an example of what's happened just in August this year in Queensland. And what we see is that the courts have recognised her 10-week unborn baby.
Yeah, double murder. They've said that there's
Absolutely.
2 lives here, and there's such a tremendous inconsistency between the 2 positions.
You can't have it. You can't have it both ways,
Yeah.
can you, Martin? I mean, you're a lawyer. You can't have that both ways. It's either a life that has been lost at 10 weeks gestation, or it's not. And if it is, then what are we doing? What are we doing?
And some of these concerns, it's not like the proposal that we have to accommodate these concerns is unusual. I mean, in European jurisdictions, which are often held up as the most progressive places, people would be surprised, I think, to see that in many of those places, like Belgium and the Netherlands and France and Germany, there's a collection of different protections. It's hard to get an abortion after 12 weeks in some of those places because you need higher justifications. There are mandatory counselling provisions. There are cooling off periods, this kind of thing. So it's not an unusual thing, is it?
No, it's not. We're actually looking at a real Wild West sort of legislation here in comparison to other countries. The European nations still recognise the sanctity of life to that degree. And whilst I even feel sad up to 12 weeks, that 12-week gestation period is very normal throughout the European countries. And so if we look to Europe, we see all of these countries with up to 12 weeks, some of them a couple of weeks later, but very few into late term. And as you say, very difficult. And counselling, mandatory counselling is there. Our government will not even look or listen to those arguments.
Well, Wendy, let's just drill down into that. I mean, what the government has, by contrast, is a bill that is one of the most radical in the world. I think it would be on equal par with the Victorian situation, and then you've really just got places like Canada, which can match it. How committed are they to this? You said you're not getting much traction with the arguments. How committed are they to this open slather, full-on abortion regime?
Look, they're as committed as you can be. And I even think that our bill is more radical and more extreme than the Victorian bill. I think it's later, maybe fine. But they are so committed that they have gone out really strongly saying that we're going to consult widely, we're going to listen to people, we're going to take on board all the arguments. And everything that comes back to them is saying we don't want this bill. So they put forward the latest round of submissions. It's the first time that I know of that our government put forward an electronic submission that people could actually fill in basically a form. And so I don't know whether it's knowingly or unwittingly, but they actually did their own poll, really, because many of the questions were yes and no. And for instance, their first question was, do you agree with abortion being available up to 22 weeks? And do you know that 18% of people said yes? 18%.
Wow.
On their
18.
poll. Yes. So, and in saying that, the people who said no was 61%, and there were many that just didn't answer that question.
Right.
So, but 18% of people answered their question, do you agree that termination should be lawful? It was, do you agree that termination should be lawful up to 22 weeks? And 18% of people said yes.
That's not a public poll like Galaxy or a news poll or something. That is the government's own question. Exactly,
the government going to the people, and the government are going to the people on all sorts of things at the moment. The government are going to the people on rental. They're going to the government about how people house. But they're going to the people and asking. The government are going to the people asking their opinion, and they're saying that they're listening. Well, listen to this one. Please listen to this one. I mean, there's other questions as well. Do you agree that termination should be lawful beyond 22 weeks? And that one was actually 21 because less people abstained. So 21 of the population said that abortion should be lawful after 22 weeks. But in that one, 76% of people said no.
And
So after 22 weeks, 76% of people who were polled by our government said no, it should not be available.
and in terms of the submissions received by the government, there was thousands. What's the breakdown there in terms of support and opposition?
It's about close to over 80% of people did not want this bill. So again, when the government calls for submissions, normally there might be 100, 200. The numbers are low that people really care about issues. In this particular one, it was over 6,000 people put forward their arguments, either in this electronic submission way or put forward more substantive arguments like ACL did. So we put forward something that, and people should go on and have a look at our submissions online. But there's probably about 400, maybe 600 substantive ones, but then there's these other electronic.
It seems that no argument's good enough to push back even the sex selection thing for a group of politicians that would otherwise identify themselves as feminists of some kind. They won't even respond to that argument. But is there hope that the law will be stopped? I understand this is really coming down to the vote in the Parliament, essentially. Now, Labor has the barest of majorities. What's the chances of us stopping it in the vote?
You know what? It's going to take a miracle, but I believe in miracles, and we're also working really hard. And so the numbers are very tight, and at the moment, the government has.
And so essentially we do need some people in Labor to decide that this is too far and vote against it, and that's the focus of the lobbying at the moment.
Correct.
And can people participate in a campaign?
Oh, please. Anybody watching who lives in Queensland, no matter who your Member of Parliament is, even if you think, oh, they'll definitely vote the right way, contact your Member of Parliament because they need to hear your voices. They hear a lot of voices from very radical and sometimes very angry people. And so we need to actually give them the ammunition from the pro-life side, the side that would say choose life. And so contact your Member of Parliament, contact our Premier and our opposition leader. Those two women are very important as well. And let them know that you are praying for them, but also let them know that you really believe that this bill is not one that protects life in any way, either of the mother, even of the father's wishes, or of the
Wendy, it's been a very comprehensive rundown on the issue. Thanks for your passion. Thanks for what you're doing. And, again, just put out the call. Anybody who's watching, who's in Queensland, heed the call, get onto the email, send letters, and also just watch what's going on with the campaign more broadly because other opportunities may come up. So thanks very much, Wendy, for joining us on Voice for Values.
Thank you, Martin. I always appreciate talking to you.